what baffles me about that is I'm just doing research. Like, I'm literally just taking a user-centered approach with my cross-functional part. This is rocket science. And yet I find that so many UXers dig their heels in so far on like, but you don't understand me, and you don't understand design, and you don't understand, a research methodology, or you don't understand, and it's just, candidly, it's like me, us. And I'll just say that if you put like half of those calories into understanding them and what they're up against and what they're trying to, juggle and value, and probably a faster route to success.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to How We Scaled It for Design Teams, a show that explores the journey through the arduous road of growing a successful design practice. I'm your host, Adam Perlis, founder and CEO of Academy, the UX staffing and recruiting agency, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Michael Holzer, head of UX, Hubspot. In this episode, we'll explore the importance of fostering strong relationships with cross-functional teams, along with Michael's candid insights on why many product designers often feel undervalued in their roles. But before we do that, if you enjoy this content, please take 2 seconds to like and subscribe on our YouTube and Spotify channels. It'd mean a lot. Without further ado, welcome, Michael.
Hey, Adam. Thanks for having me. Appreciate being here. I've seen a bunch of the other names that are on this podcast, and I'm humbled. I probably don't deserve to be alongside a lot of them, but I'm happy to be here. Happy to have a conversation about scaling design teams, for sure. Something I love doing.
Amazing. Well, I forcefully disagree with that. I think you absolutely have earned your keep among those names. We're very excited to have you, and especially being the head of UX for such an amazing product. I think a lot of folks use out there in the business world. So actually, it's a great place to start, is really to hear about that amazing journey. I'd love to hear about your early career all the way through this awesome role that you have now as head of UX at HubSpot. And, I think that framing really helps our audience understand, who you are and how you got to this place.
Sure. Yeah. So I always ask people when they ask me, like, how far back exactly do you want me to zoom back? Because I can go back quite a ways. But I do think it's, for me, I had a very hard time with school. Sitting behind a desk was not really my jam. That wasn't how I learned. So I kept sort of dropping out of school and finding jobs that were just more interesting, more intriguing, better way for me to learn. So the first one I started was more in the industrial design space, and I did model making for a bicycle company called Bell Sports, and got to do model making for like bicycle helmets, bicycle pumps, things like that. And even that first sort of design job for me was it just made a huge imprint on how I think about design even today, because when you're thinking about bicycle helmets, the material matters. You can't, it's a no failure design case. You can't wear a bicycle helmet and have it not protect your head when you fall. I'm still a cyclist to this day, so everybody wear a helmet, please. But it's where I first sort of learned this relationship between the material and the design and the aesthetics and form and function. And this was like, I was really young, so I had arguably no business doing this work. And then I left, and then I went back to school, tried again, and then left college again and got into landscape architecture. I was designing like commercial irrigation systems. And somehow that led into skate park design. So this was back when cities were hiring landscape architecture firms they were effectively trying to get kids to stop thrashing the cities by skating all over the cities. So they were like, oh, well, if we build a skate park, the kids will go there. And they'll stop, ruining the curbs and all the infrastructure of the cities. So I actually used some of my model making skills there, and we started building like little mini models of these skate parks and taking them to cities, and the cities would approve them that way. And That was also super fun and just pure luck and privilege. I don't know what you want to call it. And that company that I was working for, and this is it was like, 8 or 9 people or something, a small firm. But the web started to take off and they were like, oh, hey, we need a website. Like, what is this thing? And so I was like, cool, I'll try to figure it out. And I was hooked at that point. I've been digital ever since, arguably, outside of, I don't know, designing. I designed a couch this last weekend. I won't go into why, but I did. The leap into digital, just that turnaround of like being technical and being creative at the same time and being able to kind of oscillate back between those two things, and that turnaround time, like I was hooked. So I, worked at big companies, small companies, spent time in startups. I did go at startups and spent, I think it was probably 4 or 5 years as a product manager. I think this is good for everybody to know. I'm sure there are tons of your listeners who are designers, UXers, researchers, content designers, what have you, that were like, I think product managers get to make the important decisions, and I'm going to go be a product manager. And I was one of you, and I did that, and I tried it, and I'm happy to talk to anybody that wants to talk about it. It was a very good experience. And there's a reason why I came back to design. That's what I can say. So anyway, startups, and then I decided to go back to design and join Google. And I spent 10 years at Google. And I think that that's where I really formulated how to scale design teams, how to scale period. Like, you don't get to spend time at Google and not think about scale. Like, you just don't. It doesn't matter whether it's the software, how to think about customers, how to think about design and design systems, like whatever it is, like you are forced to think about scale, which can also be a drag on the system. Like, it's expensive, it's hard, it takes a long time, etc. But it was fun. And so I worked in 4 different product areas across Google. And after 10 years, the short version is I was like, I am so ingrained and I have had so much Google Kool-Aid that if I don't leave now, I don't know that I'll ever be able to work anywhere else. And it wasn't because I was mad at Google or tired of Google or anything like that. Like, I had a terrific time there. It was a great company to work for. So I just, started lightly interviewing and made the leap to HubSpot. It's almost exactly, it'll be 2 years, I think, in a week. And it's been a hell of a ride. And so I guess I will say one of the other things, because it does relate to sort of the topic at hand of scaling design teams. At Google, I worked on design ladders and UX hiring at Google, so kind of across the whole organization. But when you're there, you're always a player in the system. Like, you're a cog. Like, make no mistake about it. Like, you just are. And so when coming over to HubSpot and being able to lead the whole UX team, I knew the job was going to be different. I knew that I was going to have more accountability and more responsibility, more control to make changes in the culture and the organization, the way we ran, things that I'd wanted to do in the past at other companies. And that was enticing.
Wow, that is super interesting. I love that you made that parallel, because, I think sometimes people will think about a place as big as HubSpot, and, certainly everybody knows that, like, HubSpot is not as big a company as Google, but that kind of mental shift that happens when becoming a design leader at a certain type of company at a certain stage where they're at, are actually 2 very different paradigms that you need to think about. At Google, you're not going to be able to drive probably a lot of the cultural things, maybe with your own team, some things, but not in the way that you'd be able to do it at a place like HubSpot. And I think that was a really interesting and nice framing as people start to think about navigating what the next step is in their career. If they are going to be a head of design somewhere, what is the difference between going between one of those two types of orgs? And there's other ones too, right? Of course, startup has a much different vibe than, HubSpot. But yeah, that's an incredible journey. And it was great to hear how you went from designing skate parks and bike helmets to somehow leading some of the top organizations in the world in design and having a brief stint in product management, apparently.
Yeah. It was fun.
So, I think that's also interesting for people to hear that, hey, there's opportunities to change, right? Change direction and pivot. And, it sounds like that you did a few times actually to get to the place where you really wanted to go. One of the things that you and I, are set to talk about today is really something that seems to be foundational to you at HubSpot and the success that you've had there, which is, your partnership with cross-functional teams. And I think one of the biggest gripes across the industry is the fraught relationship and frankly, the mistrust at times that exists between a lot of cross-functional teams and partners. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience and how you've been able to bridge that gap, with your partners there or even in other places you've worked.
Sure. I think part of the reason why I even included the sort of upfront, that connection of material and understanding the engineering of, bicycle helmets when I first started was just, it cemented this. So when I was just learning about bicycle helmets and the physics of it and everything, I got to partner with mechanical engineers who were doing stress tests and these kind of things just on like what happens when you fall. And so I mean, obviously those were super formative years for me thinking about design. But this like partnership between me wanting to push the boundaries on creativity and design and what could it look like and what could it feel like and, but needing it to back into that function, and has always been a reality for me of design work. I think I like that practicality. I do. Like, I really like the tension between how far you can push something and it still be very useful, very functional, and very practical as a solution. I think that's where I've oscillated between consumer and B2B products as well. I think they're both super fun to work on, for the record. That's one other thing I'll just throw out there is that I've found that sometimes people that work on B2B think the consumer is easy, and people that work on consumer think the B2B is easier, and like they're both hard. They're just hard for totally different reasons. So make no mistake, I don't think anybody has it easy in software, period. Anybody. But those cross-functional partnerships have just been core to how I think great products end up in people's hands. And when I was at Google and I would talk to other people in the industry and my peers at other companies and these kind of things, and I think in the industry, a lot of people know that there are varying degrees of what sort of power dynamic does UX or design have at a given company? And that sort of changes, and that often changes over time. But one of the decisions I remember consciously making when I joined Google was like, Google has some of the best engineers on the planet. It turns out I'm not very good at writing code. So if I want the best experiences for the customers that I support to be shipped, it's very helpful for me to have the best engineers working side by side with me. And it helped. It's true. It totally helped. Like, working with them was a treat. And same can be said for the product managers that I worked with over there, and the product marketers and everybody else. Like, I was inspired by them. They pushed design. I pushed engineering. It's like that. It just created this environment for everybody pushing each other. And so that also started early on in, the time I spent at Yahoo and the time I spent at Opsware. And I feel like it's always been a cornerstone of how I approach the job is everybody has a different viewpoint on the problem, and let's embrace those different viewpoints and create that tension. And out the other side of that tension is the best product possible for the customer. That's the short of it. I think the inspiration that I have found from cross-functional partners, primarily product managers and engineers, has probably been the most formative of anything in my career. And I think it's because they think about the problem differently. They're just coming from a different point of view. And I'm curious, and I'm always like, oh, well, okay. Like, what if I thought about the problem from that perspective? Would I have a different solution from a design perspective? Maybe. But it's at least worth thinking about. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, absolutely does. I mean, I think the parts that I took away that kind of were the most valuable are that, when you got to Google, you started to feel a bit humbled by the fact that you had these amazing, amazing partners who are clearly, the best in the world at what they did. They wouldn't be at Google otherwise, right? And so you said, you know what, I need to maybe take a mental shift here in terms of my approach to this and allow them to, lead in their own ways and listen to them and try to have a much more collaborative discussion about the decisions we're going to make for a product, because I trust them. I trust them because they're the best in the world at what they do. And it sounds like that shift has really helped you go into all situations, no matter what team, whether it's Google or not, right? Take a much different lens and approach to your collaboration with those folks. And from the beginning, lead with that trust so that you can hear their perspective and immediately challenge your own assumptions about a particular project and not have a big ego about it. And that's led to creating higher quality products. It's led to better relationships with your counterparts, and frankly, a better experience for yourself, because you're going to be a lot happier if you're not constantly at battle with another department, right? Is that a good summary of kind of like your perspective and approach?
Definitely. I would say it started as soon as you said like the sort of being humbled at Google part by the engineers there. I was like, wow, wait a minute, it started way before that. I just because I don't mention it doesn't mean that I wasn't humbled by people at that company, but I definitely have like very sharp memories of Opsware. So for those that don't know who Opsware is, Opsware, LoudCloud was a hosting company that turned into Opsware. And Opsware sold to HP, I can't even remember when, but Ben Horowitz was the CEO of Opsware, and Mark Andreessen was the chairman of the board. So when they sold to HP, it became Andreessen Horowitz. the VC. And so this was a very long time ago, and I was so out of my league at this company. Like, if you're like trying to keep up with the complexity of data center automation at that point in my career, just even understanding it, I was just trying to hang on to understanding it. That the other thing that you said that was really resonated with me was this is totally selfish, which is I learned, like I was like learning the whole time that I was doing this. Like, it was so fun. Like, I don't know, for me, like learning something new, whether it's a new industry, a new space, a new technology, whatever it is like the most enjoyable part of, I think, being in technology. It's what's kept me here, is that it's ever evolving. I mean, scary times, but so anytime that I can find people that will teach me new things, like, I'm in. So
that's I think that's beautiful. I mean, that connection between this kind of learning mindset, really growth mindset, and that kind of humbling experience that you had at Opsware, and how that kind of led into your formative experience at Google, and helping really foster those cross-functional collaborations, which were pretty much essential to your work there. I think is a great framing, great mindset for people, or any leader who is starting to either be at odds with their cross-functional partners, or just trying to do, to work on those relationships. I think it's really important that they start to think about their mindset, think about how a growth mindset or a learning mindset, and also go from a perspective of trust mindset can really help be laying the groundwork for great relationships. I think is a really good lesson and takeaway from this. One of the things I want to pivot to is, you and I have spoken a little bit about really the value of a designer today. And I think in the past, there's been this relationship between design, maybe the rest of the org, that has been a constant, uphill battle. I think designers for a long time have been fighting for their seat at the table, and they got it in many places, which is fantastic. I think it's great for the industry. But sometimes at their own expense, or at the industry's expense. And you had some hot takes on this, and I'd love for you to share some of those perspectives with our audience.
Sure. I think I can a little bit connect it to the previous conversation, in that I'll start by saying, I'm not sure that, like, I will always push for the best design, the best experience for the customers. Like, that's my role in the organization. Having said that, I don't think I've ever, myself in my career or on behalf of the organization that I'm leading, been more successful by picking a fight with cross-functional partners, right? Like, that's never led to like a better outcome. And the starting place of, like, okay, let's say we don't agree about these things. If we can start from a place of me trying to understand where you're coming from, how are you incentivized? What different things are you, like, let's say you're a product manager. Like, what things are you juggling that I am not aware of? Like, let's ignore the million things that I'm juggling that you're not aware of. Just ignore it for a minute. And I'm just focusing on you and what you're juggling, and what is most important to you, and what is most important, like your job ladder and everything else. To me, that is far more interesting and far more deserving of my attention than me being all spun up about the million things that I think are most important. Because like we're more likely to move the conversation forward. I'm more likely to learn something. We're more likely to connect on something and find the middle ground. It's just like it, and I'll say what baffles me about that is I'm just doing research. Like I'm literally just taking a user-centered approach with my cross-functional partners. This isn't rocket science. And yet I find that so many UXers dig their heels in so far on like, but you don't understand me, and you don't understand design, and you don't understand, a research methodology, or you don't understand, and it's just candidly, it's like me, us. And I'll just say that if you put like half of those calories into understanding them and what they're up against and what they're trying to, juggle and value, and it's probably a faster route to success, faster route to certainly being happy. Because I spent a lot. It's not like I haven't spent my fair share of years being the pissed off UXer. The world doesn't get me. I certainly wasn't happy. Like, I ultimately felt like it's one of those, the sort of canonical situation where you're like, you and me are angry at each other, and you decided to, you're like, I'm over it, I don't care, but I'm holding a grudge. Well, like, that's only hurting me. So that has more or less been my angle, and I guess my pitch to UXers in the industry, which is like, should we just hit a pause button and continue to learn about all the facets that go into software development and how we can be additive. And I know it's easier said than done. And I'm not saying that we don't add a ton of value and that we're always fighting the good fight and trying to get, either a seat at the table, or when we do have a seat at the table, making the most of it. I think my push is just that let's not do it at the cost of our own happiness and our own learning and our own success. Because again, what I've never had success in my entire career is complaining about having a seat at the table. Never. Like, I've never complained about it, and then like the PM across the table's been like, you're right. You're totally my bad. So true. Here you go.
Yeah.
Why don't you come in tomorrow and just tell us all what to do? And like, never happened once.
Right. I just love this take so much. It's so honest. Because, and I think, it was a good fight, and we continue to have it as an industry, right? I think it's important to not lose sight that it is still important that design continue to be valued in organizations. And I do have some follow-up questions on how, but I want to just come back to your main points here, which were like really, I just thought fantastic. I think a lot of designers feel like they need to fight the good fight. They need to advocate for the user always. And they should to a certain extent, like that is their job, and they should, be saying that. But I think what's really important is what you're saying. It's like, sometimes you need to let it go, right? Sometimes you need to state your opinion and can do it strongly with passion and also, or passion rather, and with, foundational backing, but know when to back off and say, you know what, like maybe it's not the right time for this, or maybe there's a business goal we need to align to here that's, that needs to be, massaged. Maybe I need to come to an agreement with my cross-functional partner or what the goal is here, right? And if I push too hard, then I risk sacrificing this relationship with this person, right? Where, and we're not going to get to one, our goals together, and then two, individually, we're both going to walk away unhappy. And so I think that's a really important message, is like kind of to know when we're pushing too hard. Because if you are a staunch advocate for the UX process and you will not waver from that, then people are just going to see you as being inflexible and hard to work with. And what you seem to be advocating for is, don't be hard to work with. Be a team player, be collaborative, try to learn from others, try to understand their goals and from their perspective. And as a result, you'll have better relationships with them, and you'll likely build better products together. Is that a good kind of summarization of what you were saying before?
I can just say that has been my experience. Take it or leave it. It has worked reasonably well for me. I'd
say.
I think the thing I would add is that it's the other lens to look through is how long of a view do you take on the game that we're playing. So the canonical fight is sort of velocity versus quality, for example. And like we battle that one every day. It's always a trade-off. And what I focus on is clarity of trade-offs. So I just want us to know when we're making the trade-off. And then it's fine, right? Sometimes we make the trade-off for monetization reasons. Sometimes we make them for speed to market reasons. Sometimes we make them for, complexity of implementation. It's a trade-off, no matter what. Or we could literally spend the next 10 years rounding corners and getting things absolutely perfect on the experience and never ship this thing. Also an option. But I take this like much longer view of, we're on this arc of all of us caring about the quality of the experience, and we're going to make slow moves all along the way. And we're going to know when we're making good trade-offs and bad trade-offs. And we're going to keep a little bit of an accounting book. So we just know, like, hey, like, fine, we made the business decision here to make a trade-off. Let's just all just talk about it. We just, like, no judgment being placed that we did it, because this is a business. It is what it is. And so it's like, just play that longer game. You don't have to win every single fight for quality over velocity. You just at the end of the game, you do want to create the best experience possible for your users, and help everyone understand the value that a better experience can have on the brand and the product and the experience and the customer value that adds over time, and the business metrics that good UX can move. It's like slowly but surely.
Indeed. And I know we're coming up on time, but I wanted to follow up with one important question on the same, kind of track, which is, obviously, your advice is to, not push too hard on those battles, right? Like, you should advocate for yourself and the user, but like know where the line is. Where do you think it's time to advocate for design having that seat at the table? Is that inside of the organization? Is that outside the organization through thought leadership or meetings, or, is that is it building those cross-functional partnerships, and that actually by way of like just building better relationships, actually that leads to design being more highly considered and more valued because you're a thought partner? What is it for you?
Definitely the latter, hands down. Like, it's very dependent on the organization. It's very dependent on the team. It's very, I think sometimes, HubSpot has a very strong culture of PM, UX, and engineering being this really strong, like three-legged stool. It's almost like the default structure of teams, which is super helpful. And when I first came in to the organization and learned that, I was like, woohoo! Like, we already won the first leg of the race here. This is awesome. So I think it depends on where UX is in the organization, like where you want to play. But I feel like there's no risk in investing in those cross-functional relationships, because you can always influence through those. Because if, let's say, UX doesn't have the power in the organization right now, well, chances are pretty high one of those two other folks do. So to the extent that you can help influence through them and they start to trust you, trust your instincts, and trust the value you're bringing, they'll start bringing you into those things. They'll start parroting the things you're saying, which also don't get attached to ideas coming from you. Be willing to get anybody to say anything that will lead to a better experience. That's my other tip. But I think investing in those relationships early, often, and do think about it selfishly. Like, think about all the things that you're going to learn from them. You'll be better for it.
Absolutely. That's a great place to end. Michael, I can't thank you enough for spending the time with us to talk about this subject. I think our audience is going to get a ton of value out of this, considering this is likely one of the biggest issues that they face as design leaders, especially as they're scaling their teams. If people want to follow along with, anything about you or your content, what's the best place to kind of like, see more about you?
This is where I'm not good at this part of my job, which is, I'm generally an introvert, and so I get energy by building products. That's where I spend my time. But I would say follow me on LinkedIn. If I'm gonna post things, it's gonna be there. Hopefully one day I'll get back to writing on Medium and everything else.
Totally. Well, certainly we'll be following along with the products you guys are building. You guys got an amazing team and an amazing product you're building over at HubSpot. We've been users for many years over at Academy. So incredible. Well, thanks again for spending the time, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.